A colossal stone guardian rests silently in a remote Pakistani desert. This is the Sphinx of Balochistan, a discovery so controversial it challenges everything we know about ancient history. By the end of this, you will possess the full story behind this incredible enigma, weighing the evidence for yourself. We will explore the strange features that suggest masterful carving and investigate the possibility of a lost civilization waiting to be acknowledged. Why does an official archaeological investigation remain so elusive? What does this giant stone figure truly represent? What forgotten story is the Earth itself trying to tell us? The first whispers of this giant began not with a formal expedition, but with the slow, curious observations of those traveling along Pakistan's remote Makran coast. This is a stark and unforgiving landscape, a place where the sea meets a vast, arid terrain of rock and sand. For generations, local inhabitants passed by the immense stone shape, perhaps seeing it as just another remarkable feature of the natural world. But then, a shift in perspective occurred. The credit for bringing this formation to global attention often goes to a small number of determined explorers and researchers who, armed with satellite imagery and a willingness to venture off the map, took a much closer look. They saw what locals had seen for centuries, but they saw it with new eyes. What had been accepted as a strangely perfect hill began to reveal a different story. The initial reaction was one of sheer disbelief. A struggle to reconcile the scale of the thing with the possibility it was not a product of random erosion. It stands as a monumental silhouette against the sky, measuring an astonishing 180 feet in height and nearly 600 feet in length. To stand before it is to feel dwarfed, to confront a presence that seems to hold its breath. The moment of revelation came when someone first placed a photograph of this Balochistan formation side by side with the iconic Great Sphinx of Giza. The resemblance was and remains startling. While the Egyptian Sphinx presents the body of a lion with a human head, the figure in Pakistan appears more feline, perhaps a crouching lion or even a cat, its weathered features gazing eternally toward the horizon. This visual echo ignited a firestorm of immediate and profound questions. How could two such colossal, similar structures exist on opposite ends of the known ancient world? Was this a staggering coincidence of wind and rain, or were they looking at the eroded masterpiece of a forgotten civilization's hands? The sheer scale alone argued against simple chance, demanding an explanation that, so far, no one has been able to provide. Its sheer size is almost incomprehensible from the ground. This colossal formation rises to a height of 180 feet, with a body that stretches for nearly 600 feet across the desert floor. Its posture is one of eternal vigilance, a giant feline form crouched low, as if ready to spring into motion. The head is distinct from the body, crowned with a shape that many observers immediately compare to the Nemes headdress worn by the Egyptian Sphinx, that iconic striped cloth that frames the face and rests on the shoulders. While heavily weathered, the suggestion of a face is clear, with a prominent brow line and what appears to be a nose and mouth, all facing forward with an inscrutable expression. When you place images of the two sphinxes side by side, the parallels become difficult to dismiss as mere chance. Both possess a similar seated posture, a massive body resting on its paws. Both have a clear, vertical division between the head and the torso. The potential headdress on the Balochistan formation mirrors the silhouette of the Egyptian one, though it is more eroded. The facial structure, while less defined in Pakistan, follows a comparable layout, yet the differences are just as telling. The erosion patterns are distinct. The Great Sphinx of Giza shows clear evidence of wind and sand erosion, with vertical fissures and grooves. The Balochistan structure, however, displays a more rounded, smoothed appearance, which could be the result of different climatic conditions or a different type of rock. This is the core of the debate. Are we seeing the artistic hand of an ancient civilization, a masterwork that time has softened? Or is this simply a spectacular example of pareidolia, our brain's tendency to see familiar patterns in random shapes, amplified by the powerful and suggestive form of its Egyptian counterpart? The rock itself holds the answer, but its surface tells two very different stories depending on who is looking. Could nature alone sculpt such a symmetrical, purposeful-looking monument, or does its very posture point to a forgotten architect? That inscrutable expression carved by wind and rain presents the most compelling counterargument. For many geologists, the story of the Balochistan Formation is not one of human hands, but of elemental forces working over incomprehensible stretches of time. They look at this landscape and see a perfect recipe for what they call yardangs, which are streamlined, wind-sculpted landforms. The powerful, sand-laden winds that blow consistently across the Makran coast are a master carver. Over thousands, even millions of years, these winds act like a natural sandblaster, wearing away softer rock while leaving harder, more resistant layers behind. The entire region is composed of sedimentary rock, which is formed in layers, and these layers have different densities. A softer layer of sandstone will erode far more quickly than a hard, compact layer of limestone sitting just above or below it. This process, known as differential weathering, is precisely what can create the appearance of a deliberate structure. The distinct head and body of the formation could simply be the result of two different rock layers eroding at drastically different rates. The smoother, more rounded contours are not signs of ancient tools, but the signature of a relentless, polishing wind. To a trained geologist, the Sphinx of Balochistan is a spectacular example of this natural art, a beautiful and intricate deception played by physics on our perception. This leads directly to the powerful psychological phenomenon of pareidolia. Our brains are hardwired to recognize faces and familiar shapes. It is a survival instinct. We see the man in the moon, a face in the clouds, or a dragon in a mountain ridge. When we look at the Balochistan Formation, we are not just looking at a rock. We are looking at it with the iconic image of the Great Sphinx of Giza already in our minds. This powerful pre-existing template shapes our interpretation, causing us to connect the natural dots into a recognizable feline form. As one geologist plainly stated in an interview, quote, "Give nature the right tools and enough time, and it will produce shapes that defy our belief." What we are seeing is a testament to the power of erosion, not a lost chapter in human history. The rock does not lie, but our eyes can be tricked into reading a story that was never written. So if this is just a trick of the mind and the wind, why does its specific alignment and location feel so strangely intentional? Yet the possibility of a natural masterpiece is fiercely challenged by a growing number of independent researchers. They argue that the sheer symmetry and specific anatomical details of the formation betray the hand of a master carver. Proponents of the man-made hypothesis point to what they see as clear, linear features on the structure's body. These long, straight ridges and grooves, they suggest, are not the random scratches of the wind, but the remnants of deliberate tool marks, the ancient equivalent of chisel strikes on a monumental scale. The shape of the paws, the defined curve of the back, and the distinct separation of the head from the body all appear too geometrically precise to be the sole work of chaotic erosion. One of the most compelling arguments centers on what appears to be a series of steps or platforms carved directly into the base of the structure. These leveled, terraced sections look like architectural elements, something nature rarely, if ever, produces with such regularity. Could these be the remains of a ceremonial platform, or perhaps even an entrance into a hidden chamber within the Sphinx itself? The most prominent voice for this theory is that of author and researcher Brian Forster, who has extensively documented the site. With a background in studying ancient construction techniques across Peru and Egypt, Forster brings a comparative eye to Balochistan. He argues that the weathering on the formation, while significant, does not match the classic patterns of wind-sculpted yardangs. Instead, he sees a form that was first carved and then softened by millennia of water erosion, a crucial distinction that could point to a far wetter climate in the distant past, and therefore a much older date for its possible construction. This idea of an alternative history is electrifying. It suggests that a sophisticated culture capable of megalithic engineering might have thrived in this now desolate region, creating a monument to rival the great wonders of the ancient world. If this is not a trick of the light and stone, but a real constructed edifice, then who could have possibly built it, and for what unimaginable purpose? But the mystery does not end with the solitary stone guardian. The true enigma unfolds when you pull the camera back, revealing that the so-called Sphinx may only be the centerpiece of a much grander, sprawling complex. Surrounding the massive feline form, the rocky landscape is littered with other astonishing formations that defy simple geological explanation. To those who argue for a man-made origin, these are not random rocks. They are the skeletal remains of a vast, ancient temple. What appear to be rows of gigantic, collapsed pillars lie scattered around the base of the main structure. These are not simple, rounded boulders, but long, cylindrical stone segments, some showing what look like flattened surfaces and sharp 90-degree angles. They rest in a chaotic alignment that suggests they once stood upright, perhaps supporting a massive roof or forming a grand colonnade leading toward the Sphinx itself. Beyond the pillars, the terrain rises and falls in a series of leveled platforms and what seem to be the foundations of vanished walls. These are not the gentle, sloping hills created by nature. They form distinct geometric shapes, squares and rectangles that outline the footprints of rooms and chambers. In one section, a massive, flat slab of rock rests at a precise height, its surface unnaturally smooth and leveled. It stands in a position that feels ceremonial, an altar placed before the watchful gaze of the stone beast. If these features are indeed the work of human hands, then we are not looking at a single statue. We are looking at the heart of a lost metropolis, a ceremonial center designed with intention and grandeur. The scale is staggering, suggesting a civilization with the architectural knowledge, manpower, and spiritual drive to reshape an entire mountainside. This would not be a simple outpost, but a site that could potentially rival the great temple complexes of ancient Egypt or Mesopotamia in its ambition. The question then becomes terrifying in its implications. What kind of society possessed the capability to execute such a monumental project, and what cataclysm, what slow fade into oblivion, could have erased them so completely from human memory that only these weather-beaten bones of stone remain? Pinpointing the age of this stone giant is perhaps the most frustrating part of the entire mystery. How do you date a mountain? Traditional archaeological methods fail us completely here. Carbon dating is useless as it measures the decay of organic material, and there are no bones, no charcoal fires, no buried artifacts nestled against its base to provide a clear timestamp. We are left staring at the rock itself, reading the faint story written in its erosion. This has led to a dizzying range of proposed ages, each one more speculative than the last. The most conservative estimates, often from mainstream geologists, place its formation squarely in the realm of natural processes over millions of years. They see the rounded contours as the work of relentless wind, a sculpture carved across geological epochs far predating human civilization itself. In this view, the Sphinx is not a relic of history, but a feature of prehistory, a contemporary of the Ice Ages. A more popular theory among alternative researchers links it directly to the era of the Great Sphinx of Giza. If the Egyptian Sphinx was built around 4,500 years ago, could a sister civilization across the continent have carved its own guardian at the same time? Proponents of this idea point to the visual similarities as proof of a shared cultural idea, a global symbol of power and protection that spanned the ancient world. But the most radical theory pushes the date back into almost mythical territory. Some researchers, like Brian Forrester, suggest the erosion patterns, particularly the deep, rounded scoops on the sides of the formation, are characteristic of water, not wind. This would require a time when the Balochistan Desert was not a desert at all, but a lush, rainy landscape. The last time this region experienced such significant rainfall was at the end of the last ice age, over 12,000 years ago. This theory dares to suggest the Sphinx of Balochistan could be a survivor from a lost epoch, a monument built by a sophisticated culture that was wiped from the map by rising sea levels and climatic shifts, a civilization that history has entirely forgotten. Each timeline tells a different story about human origins. Is this a natural wonder, a parallel ancient achievement, or a ghost from a sunken world? Without physical proof, the stone keeps its secret, and the question of its age remains a blank slate for our imagination. The silence of this stone guardian echoes a deeper historical puzzle. Who, if anyone, built it? Its location on the map offers the first tantalizing clue, placing it within striking distance of one of the ancient world's greatest enigmas, the Indus Valley civilization. This sophisticated society, flourishing over 4,000 years ago, built planned cities like Mohenjo-Daro with advanced drainage systems and standardized bricks. Yet for all their achievements, no colossal statuary, no giant stone sphinxes have ever been definitively linked to them. Their art was smaller, more intimate. So, if the Balochistan formation is man-made, does it represent a completely different, unknown branch of that culture? Or is it a relic from an even earlier time, a precursor civilization whose monumental style the Indus Valley people later abandoned? The geographical proximity is undeniable, but the architectural language is utterly foreign. This gap in the evidence fuels more speculative connections. Could there be a link to ancient Egypt? Proponents of this idea point to the undeniable visual similarity between the two sphinxes. They suggest it might not be a coincidence, but evidence of a shared cultural idea that spanned continents. Was there an ancient exchange of knowledge, a forgotten trade route that carried not just goods, but grand architectural concepts between the Nile and the Makran coast? The Sphinx, as a symbolic guardian of sacred spaces, could have been a motif adopted by two separate, advanced cultures. Venturing further into the realm of speculation, some look toward Mesopotamia. The ziggurats, those massive step temples, are echoed in the apparent platforms and terraces at the base of the Balochistan structure. Could this site be a hybrid, a colossal sphinx watching over a temple complex that resembles the great structures of Ur or Babylon? The most radical theory casts the net even wider, invoking the legendary sunken continent of Lemuria. In this narrative, the Sphinx of Balochistan is not a product of any known civilization, but a surviving monument from a prehistoric global culture that was fragmented by a great cataclysm. Its water-like erosion patterns are cited as evidence that it witnessed a time of great floods, a memory preserved in myths worldwide. Each theory, from the scholarly to the sensational, tries to place this lonely sentinel within a human story. It is a struggle to find a context grand enough to explain its presence, a civilization bold enough to claim its creation. Yet without physical proof, these connections remain threads in a tapestry we cannot yet see. If we cannot determine who built it by looking at the cultures we know, perhaps the answer lies in something even more elusive, something written in the very stars above it. The silent stone holds more than just geological secrets. For generations, the local Baloch people have lived in the shadow of this immense formation, and their oral traditions weave a rich tapestry of meaning around it. They do not call it a sphinx. Among the local communities, the giant figure is often referred to as the Lion of Balochistan, a name that directly acknowledges its powerful feline shape. This is not a recent label coined for tourists, but a term passed down through families, a recognition of the land's most prominent feature. The stories told about it are not tales of kings and pharaohs, but of something far more primal and powerful. Some elders speak of a time when the region was lush and green, a paradise watered by great rivers. In this golden age, a mighty lion, a guardian spirit of the land, was turned to stone to stand eternal watch over the valley. This legend of a petrified guardian resonates deeply with the theory that the structure is far older than we think, a relic from a wetter climatic epoch that oral history has somehow preserved. Other folktales describe the area as a place of gods and giants, where celestial beings walked the earth and shaped the mountains with their hands. These narratives often caution against disturbing the old stones, speaking of a deep respect for the site that borders on reverence. This indigenous perspective presents a fascinating challenge to the academic debate. While geologists see a yardang and alternative researchers see a carved monument, the local law sees a sacred entity, a permanent part of their cultural and spiritual landscape. Their knowledge does not provide a blueprint or a construction date, but it offers something just as valuable, a continuous thread of human connection to this place that stretches back into the fog of time. It suggests that the true mystery is not just in the rock's origin, but in the enduring power it has held over the human imagination for centuries. If this was always seen as a lion, a guardian, then its symbolic purpose may have been understood long before satellite imagery ever revealed its form. This deep-seated local recognition begs the question, why has this profound indigenous knowledge been so consistently overlooked in the search for answers? The silent testimony of local lore now meets the cold, calculating eye of modern technology. High above the Makran coast, satellites silently map the Earth's surface, capturing images that are transforming this debate. These are not simple photographs, but detailed scans that strip away the veneer of erosion, revealing the raw geometry of the land below. From this bird's eye view, the Balochistan formation appears even more deliberate. The straight lines running along its body, which from the ground could be mistaken for natural strata, are seen from above with a startling clarity and regularity. They align with a precision that challenges the idea of random wind patterns. Even more compelling are the distinct 90-degree angles and the near-perfect symmetry of the structure's overall silhouette against the surrounding chaotically shaped terrain. It stands out as an island of order in a sea of geological noise. This analysis goes beyond simple pictures. Researchers utilize sophisticated topographic maps generated from this data, which create a three-dimensional model of the formation. These models allow them to measure slopes, angles, and elevations with scientific accuracy. When they analyze the so-called steps and platforms at the base, the data shows these are level surfaces, something wind erosion almost never creates with such flat, consistent plains. For those arguing the formation is man-made, this digital evidence is a smoking gun. They point to these leveled areas as clear evidence of terracing, a known architectural technique used by ancient cultures worldwide to create stable foundations for massive structures. The entire complex, with its scattered pillar-like stones and rectangular foundations, begins to look less like a jumble of rocks and more like the deliberate layout of a ruined temple when viewed through this technological lens. The technological arsenal does not end there. While traditional LiDAR, which uses lasers to map the ground even through forest canopy, is less useful in this bare desert, the principles of remote sensing are equally powerful. Analysts can process satellite data to highlight subtle variations in the landscape that are invisible to the naked eye. They can identify straight lines and right angles buried under millennia of sand and debris, features that are the hallmark of human construction. Geologists, however, interpret this same data through a different lens. They use these detailed models to simulate millennia of wind patterns, showing how consistent airflow from one direction could theoretically sculpt a yardang with surprisingly straight edges and a streamlined form. They argue that what looks like a platform is simply a harder layer of rock that has resisted erosion, creating a natural shelf. The debate has thus ascended from the desert floor to the digital realm, where both sides wield the same advanced tools to defend their deeply divided conclusions. The technology provides clearer questions, not clearer answers. If this digital ghost of a structure points so strongly to human design, then why does the silence from official archaeology remain so profound? The debate over this giant stone figure boils down to a single, critical question carved by time itself. Is the erosion we see the signature of a master sculptor or the untamed hand of nature? To answer that, we must become detectives of decay, comparing its weathered skin to both ancient ruins and natural wonders. The Great Sphinx of Giza offers our first point of comparison. Its body displays distinct vertical fissures and grooves, a textbook example of thousands of years of wind and sand blasting against its limestone surface. This creates a very specific striated texture. Now, look at the Balochistan formation. Its erosion is profoundly different. The contours are overwhelmingly rounded and smooth, with deep, scooped-out hollows along its sides. This is a crucial distinction. Geologists argue this is the classic look of a yardang, polished over millennia by relentless, sand-laden winds acting like a giant piece of sandpaper. But those advocating for a human origin see something else entirely. They point out that wind erosion typically creates streamlined shapes that align with the prevailing wind direction, like the prow of a ship. The Balochistan structure, however, maintains a remarkably symmetrical form from all angles, with features like its distinct paws and head that seem to defy this streamlining. This is where the water erosion theory makes a dramatic entrance. The deep, undulating, scooped-out patterns on its flanks bear a striking resemblance to the effects of heavy rainfall. When water cascades over stone for centuries, it doesn't sandblast it. It dissolves it, creating those very same rounded hollows and sinuous channels. If this is water erosion, it rewrites the entire timeline. The last period with sufficient rainfall in this now desert region to cause such damage ended over 12,000 years ago. That would place its possible construction in a forgotten epoch of human history, a time of legendary floods and lost civilizations. The rock itself holds two conflicting histories. One tells a story of natural forces working across endless time. The other whispers of a cataclysm that drowned a world, leaving only this solitary, rain-beaten sentinel as its witness. Official archaeology views the Sphinx of Balochistan with profound skepticism. The prevailing consensus within academic institutions, including Pakistan's own Department of Archaeology, is that this is a spectacular natural formation, not a relic of human history. Their position is not born of ignorance, but of a strict adherence to established scientific methodology. To them, the burden of proof lies overwhelmingly with those claiming it is man-made, and so far that proof has not met the required standard. The primary reason for dismissal is the clear and consistent presence of all the classic geological hallmarks of a yardang. Experts point to the streamlined shape, the parallel flutes and grooves aligned with the prevailing wind, and the differential weathering of sedimentary rock layers. They argue that every feature proponents call a step or a pillar can be explained through these well-understood natural processes. In the absence of any associated artifacts, no pottery shards, no tools, no burial remains, no cultural debris that would inevitably surround a major ceremonial site, the formation remains, in their eyes, an isolated geological curiosity. The academic paradigm itself is a powerful force. Archaeology operates on a framework of incremental knowledge, where new discoveries are expected to fit within or slightly expand our existing understanding of historical timelines and cultural developments. The Sphinx of Balochistan, if accepted as man-made, would not simply expand our understanding, it would shatter it. It would require rewriting chapters of human history, suggesting a previously unknown civilization with megalithic capabilities existing in a region and time that current models cannot accommodate. For a professional archaeologist, attaching one's name to such a radical theory without irrefutable evidence is a significant career risk. It invites scrutiny from peers and can lead to a loss of credibility within the very institutions that fund research. Why invest limited resources and professional reputation into investigating what all available geological evidence suggests is a natural wonder? This cautious, evidence-based approach acts as a sturdy gatekeeper, ensuring that wild speculations do not overwhelm disciplined scholarship. Yet this very rigor leaves a fundamental question hanging in the desert air. If we only ever look where we expect to find answers, how will we ever discover what we have forgotten? While official archaeology remains silent, a chorus of independent voices has risen to fill the void. These are not tenured professors, but explorers, authors, and filmmakers who have taken the investigation into their own hands, driven by a conviction that this mystery cannot be ignored. Their work, often self-funded and published outside of academic journals, forms the entire foundation of the modern Sphinx of Balochistan debate. The most prominent of these figures is Brian Forster, an author and researcher with decades of experience studying ancient sites in Peru and Egypt. Forster has visited the formation multiple times, documenting it with extensive photographs and video. His methodology is comparative, drawing direct lines between the construction techniques at sites like Sacsayhuaman and the Giza Plateau and the features he observes in Balochistan. He argues that the apparent tool marks, the stepped platforms, and the sheer symmetry of the form are inconsistent with natural weathering. In his books and popular YouTube channel, he presents this visual evidence directly to the public, framing the site as a potential megalithic complex that challenges our understanding of ancient engineering. Another key contributor is author and researcher Jonathan Gray, who wrote extensively about the formation in his book The Lost World of Giants. Gray's approach leans more heavily on cataloging anomalies and cross-referencing ancient texts and myths, proposing that the site is evidence of a pre-flood civilization. The strength of this citizen science approach is its agility and public engagement. Unbound by institutional bureaucracy or funding committees, these researchers can pursue leads that mainstream science would dismiss. They bring a fresh, often passionate perspective to the table, and their use of digital media platforms allows them to build a global community of interested followers, democratizing the investigation and putting immense pressure on official bodies to take notice. However, this approach carries significant weaknesses. Without access to formal archaeological tools like ground-penetrating radar or core sampling, their evidence remains largely photographic and interpretative. This can lead to a reliance on circumstantial evidence and visual pareidolia, where a compelling narrative can sometimes outweigh rigorous, falsifiable data. Their work is also frequently criticized for a confirmation bias, where they may selectively present features that support the man-made theory while overlooking or downplaying geological explanations for the same features. Furthermore, their publications are not peer-reviewed, meaning their theories are not subjected to the rigorous critique and validation required by the scientific method. This creates a parallel world of research, one that is incredibly effective at capturing public imagination but struggles to gain a foothold in academic circles. The question then becomes, are these independent investigators bold pioneers challenging a stagnant establishment? Or are they well-intentioned enthusiasts seeing patterns in the stone that simply are not there? Their undeniable passion keeps the mystery alive, but can passion alone carve a path to the truth? The sheer immensity of the stone guardian forces a difficult question. If human hands did carve this beast from the living rock, what kind of tools could possibly have tamed a mountain? We are not talking about small statues or simple bricks. This is a project of almost unimaginable scale, demanding tools and techniques powerful enough to reshape the landscape itself. The most straightforward answer points to the known toolkit of the ancient world. In neighboring civilizations like the Indus Valley or Egypt, artisans mastered the use of stone hammers and copper chisels. With endless patience and manpower, these simple tools can carve soft sedimentary rock. Teams of workers could have pounded the stone with dolerite hammers, gradually pecking away the surface to form the basic shape. Copper chisels, though soft, could have been used for finer details, constantly resharpened as they wore down against the unforgiving stone. But this method feels almost too small for the task at hand. The volume of stone that would need to be removed to create the Sphinx of Balochistan is staggering. Using only stone and copper, the project would require generations of laborers, a sustained effort spanning centuries. While not impossible, it pushes the limits of what we believe ancient societies were capable of organizing and sustaining. This leads to a more speculative yet fascinating line of inquiry. Could its builders have possessed a more advanced understanding of stone? At other megalithic sites around the world, like Puma Punku in Bolivia or some of the foundations in Peru, we see evidence of stonework that seems to defy simple tools. There are blocks fitted together with such precision that not even a razor blade can slide between them. Some researchers have proposed that these ancient cultures might have used methods we have since forgotten. One compelling theory involves the use of sound or vibrational energy to soften stone, making it pliable like clay, allowing it to be molded into shape before it re-hardened. Another idea points to the use of certain plant acids or chemical solutions that could have chemically weakened the rock surface, making it easier to work. These are not proven technologies, but they represent the kind of outside-the-box thinking that the monument scale seems to demand. Moving the stone is another puzzle altogether. If the scattered blocks around it are indeed fallen pillars, how were they quarried, transported, and raised? The methods used at Giza and other pyramid sites offer a blueprint. Massive stone blocks could have been placed on wooden sleds and dragged over wet sand, which reduces friction dramatically. They could have been floated on barges during seasonal floods or levered into place using intricate systems of ramps, ropes, and counterweights. The organizational feat is as impressive as the engineering. It speaks of a society with a centralized authority, capable of mobilizing and feeding a vast workforce, and with master architects who could visualize a project that would not be completed in their own lifetimes. The true mystery, then, may not be whether they had magical tools, but whether they possessed a form of knowledge so practical and so powerful that it allowed them to achieve the impossible with what we would consider primitive means. Their greatest tool might have been a profound understanding of physics, logistics, and human potential, a combination that has left behind a riddle we are still struggling to solve. That same water-worn stone might be the key to unlocking a story told across the globe. Legends of a great, world-altering flood are not confined to a single culture. They echo from the epic of Gilgamesh in Mesopotamia to the biblical story of Noah, from the deluge myths of the Maya to the ancient Indian tales of Manu. These are not just stories, they are a persistent, haunting memory of a cataclysm, a shared trauma imprinted on humanity's oldest narratives. The theory connecting the Sphinx of Balochistan to this event is as simple as it is profound. If the deep, rounded, scooped-out hollows on its body are indeed the signature of water erosion, then this monument did not just see a little rain. It endured a torrent, a prolonged and violent downpour of biblical proportions. Such erosion patterns could only form over centuries of heavy rainfall, or, more dramatically, from being submerged or battered by colossal waves. This suggests a time when the geography of this region was unrecognizable. The Makran coast, now a stark desert, would have been a lush green plain, perhaps even a coastline vulnerable to a rising ocean. A sudden, catastrophic rise in sea level, triggered by the melting ice caps at the end of the last ice age, could have sent immense tsunami-like waves crashing inland, scouring the rock faces and burying entire landscapes in silt and mud. In this scenario, the great cataclysm did not destroy the Sphinx. It may have been its preservation. A thick layer of protective sediment deposited by the floodwaters could have encased the structure, shielding it from the elements for thousands of years. Only as the climate shifted again, turning the land arid and allowing the relentless desert winds to strip away that protective blanket, was the Guardian slowly re-exposed to the sky. Its current, heavily weathered state would then be the result of two separate epochs of erosion. First, the violent, shaping force of water, and second, the slow, polishing hand of the wind that continues to this day. This transforms the Sphinx from a mere statue into a potential time capsule. It becomes a silent witness to a lost age, a monument that survived the very flood that erased the civilization that built it. If this theory holds, then the question is no longer just who built it, but what were they trying to tell us, and what were they so desperately trying to survive? What purpose could drive a civilization to carve a mountain into a lion? The silent, stony gaze of the Balochistan Guardian suggests a role far greater than mere decoration. In nearly every ancient culture that erected such colossi, these figures served as profound symbols of power, protection, and cosmic order. Looking at its Egyptian cousin provides the clearest parallel. The Great Sphinx of Giza is widely believed to be a divine guardian, protecting the necropolis of Giza and the pharaoh's journey to the afterlife. Its lion's body symbolized immense strength, while the human head represented royal authority and intelligence. It was a boundary between the world of the living and the dead, a silent sentinel against chaos. If the Balochistan formation is man-made, it could easily have served a similar function. Positioned so commandingly in the landscape, it may have been the spiritual protector of a sacred valley or a city, its formidable presence warning intruders that this was a place of power not to be trifled with. Perhaps it was more than a guardian. It might have been a direct representation of a forgotten deity. Many ancient cultures fused animal and divine attributes. The Lamashu of Mesopotamia, colossal winged bulls with human heads, guarded city gates and were considered protective spirits. In the Hindu tradition, the deity Narasimha is a fierce lion man, an avatar of Vishnu who destroys evil. The consistent feline form in Balochistan points to a culture that revered the lion's attributes: raw power, kingship, and untamed nature. This stone lion could have been an object of worship, a focal point where people gathered to appease a god of the hunt, a god of the sun, or a territorial spirit believed to control the rains and the fertility of the land. Its sheer scale would have made encounters with it an overwhelming, humbling experience, deliberately designed to instill awe and reinforce the majesty of the divine. Another compelling possibility is that it functioned as a sophisticated astronomical marker. Ancient monuments worldwide are precisely aligned with celestial events. Stonehenge marks the solstices. The Great Pyramid is aligned with uncanny accuracy to the cardinal directions. Could the Balochistan Sphinx be oriented toward a specific star or the rising sun on an equinox? Its forward gaze, fixed on the horizon, is perfectly positioned for such a purpose. This would transform it from a simple statue into a colossal calendar, its shadow or silhouette marking the changing seasons, dictating the timing for planting, harvest, and religious festivals. This function would imply a deep understanding of astronomy, a society that organized its life and its rituals around the cycles of the cosmos, carving their knowledge into the very bones of the earth for all time. And then there is the most tantalizing theory of all. Could this entire formation be a royal tomb? The potential steps and platforms at its base might not lead to a temple, but to a sealed entrance into a hidden burial chamber within the beast itself. This would mirror the function of pyramids, which were not just monuments but elaborate gateways to the afterlife for divine rulers. The desire to merge a ruler's identity with a powerful, eternal symbol is a recurring theme in antiquity. By burying a king within the body of a stone lion, his people would be ensuring his transformation into an eternal guardian of the kingdom, his power and legacy forever fused with the land. The scattered pillars and leveled foundations around it would then be the remnants of a vast mortuary complex, where priests performed rituals for the eternal soul of the entombed ruler. Each of these theories, guardian, god, clock, or tomb, paints a picture of a sophisticated society with a complex worldview. They saw themselves as part of a larger order, and they built on a scale meant to echo through the ages, leaving behind a riddle in stone that asks us not just how they built it, but what they truly believed. This stone guardian in Balochistan is far from alone in the world. The Sphinx archetype, this powerful fusion of human intelligence and animal strength, emerges in the myths and monuments of cultures separated by vast oceans and thousands of years. In ancient Greece, the Sphinx was a winged creature with a woman's head and a lion's body, a riddling monster that guarded the entrance to the city of Thebes. Its role was clear: to test and challenge those who sought to pass, a spiritual guardian of sacred knowledge. Across the globe, in the heart of Mesoamerica, we find a similar resonance. The Olmecs of ancient Mexico carved massive stone heads, but they also created altars and thrones depicting rulers emerging from the mouths of powerful, stylized jaguars. This is not a literal sphinx, but the symbolic concept is strikingly parallel: a human figure fused with the ultimate predator, representing the shamanic power of the ruler to transcend the human realm. Even in the great temples of Southeast Asia, at Angkor Wat in Cambodia, you find the Naga, the serpent deity, but also statues of guardian lions, often called Singha, placed at gateways to protect sacred spaces. The prevalence of this lion-like guardian figure raises a profound question. Are we looking at evidence of a shared archetype, a deep-seated human idea that sprang up independently across the world? Or does it hint at something more tangible, like the threads of a lost, interconnected global culture? The concept of a powerful feline guardian seems to be a universal solution to a universal human need: the desire to mark a place as sacred and protect it with a symbol of untamed supernatural power. The sheer physicality of the Balochistan formation, however, places it in a category all its own. Unlike the carved and decorated statues of Greece or Mesoamerica, it is a geological formation first. Its potential man-made origins are inferred from its shape and the surrounding landscape, not from clear artistic details. This makes its place in the global picture uniquely challenging. It could be the primordial template, the oldest and most raw expression of this guardian idea, carved on a scale that dwarfs all others. Or it could be the ultimate example of nature's mimicry, a random formation that our pattern-seeking minds have forced into a pre-existing cultural box. Where the Greek Sphinx is myth and the Olmec jaguar is art, the Balochistan Sphinx is a question carved into a mountain, a silent participant in a conversation that echoes through millennia. Does its existence suggest that the idea of the Sphinx is far older and more widespread than we ever recorded? Or does its ambiguity remind us that our search for meaning can sometimes create patterns where none exist? This growing fame casts a long shadow across the quiet desert. As images of the stone lion circle the globe, a new kind of visitor begins to arrive, drawn by the allure of an unsolved mystery. For the local communities in Balochistan, this attention is a double-edged sword. On one hand, it represents a potential lifeline. The remote region could see a much-needed economic boost from tourism, creating jobs for guides, drivers, and hospitality workers. Small guest houses might open, and local artisans could sell their crafts to visitors from around the world. This newfound interest validates generations of local lore, placing their homeland on the map in a way it never has been before. It fosters a sense of pride and global connection, turning a solitary rock formation into a point of shared human curiosity. Yet with this influx comes a palpable risk. An unregulated stream of visitors poses a direct threat to the site's fragile existence. Without established paths or protective barriers, the very ground around the formation is vulnerable to erosion from countless footsteps. The soft sedimentary rock could be scarred by graffiti or by visitors attempting to take a piece of the mystery home as a souvenir. The greatest danger, however, lies beneath the surface. The tantalizing theory that the Sphinx could be a tomb or contain hidden chambers makes it a prime target for looters. Unauthorized excavations, driven by dreams of discovering treasure, could irreparably damage the structure and destroy any archaeological context that might exist, shattering the very evidence needed to solve the mystery. The situation creates a difficult dilemma. Do you keep the site secluded to preserve it, thereby stifling local opportunity and furthering academic neglect? Or do you open the floodgates to the world, risking the monument's degradation for the sake of exposure and economic gain? The answer lies in a third path, one of responsible stewardship. The future of the Sphinx of Balochistan may depend on a coordinated effort to develop sustainable tourism, with guided tours that educate visitors on its preservation. This would require investment in basic infrastructure like walkways and informational signs, and most importantly, the involvement of local people as guardians of their own heritage. The world's gaze is now fixed upon this ancient sentinel, and the choices made today will determine whether it remains a mystery for future generations to ponder or becomes just another victim of its own compelling legend. The internet is filled with confident declarations about the carvings on this stone giant. You will often hear claims of obvious tool marks, perfect symmetry, and a form so clear it must be man-made. Yet separating these viral assertions from verifiable evidence requires a cooler, more critical eye. Let's address the most persistent myths one by one. The first and most common claim is that long, straight grooves running along the body are undeniable chisel marks. From a distance, these lines do look remarkably straight and parallel. However, geology provides a powerful counterargument. Sedimentary rock, like the stone of this formation, is deposited in layers over millions of years. These layers have different hardnesses. When wind erosion occurs, it strips away the softer layers faster than the harder ones, creating natural ridges and grooves that are often perfectly straight and parallel. What appears to be a master sculptor's guideline is in fact the direct result of this differential weathering, a common fingerprint of natural forces, not human tools. The second major misconception revolves around perfect symmetry. Proponents often present carefully angled photographs that emphasize the structure's balanced form. But a comprehensive analysis from all sides reveals a different story. The left and right sides are not mirror images. The erosion patterns are inconsistent, with one flank often more deeply scooped than the other. This asymmetry is a hallmark of wind-sculpted yardangs, where minor variations in rock density or localized wind currents create an imperfect organic form. True architectural symmetry, as seen in the Great Sphinx of Giza, is deliberate and precise. The Balochistan formation's symmetry, while striking from certain vantage points, breaks down upon closer inspection, aligning more with the unpredictable artistry of nature than the measured hand of an architect. Finally, there is the bold claim of a visible, carved mouth and eyes on the head of the formation. This is perhaps the clearest example of pareidolia at work. The features people identify as a face are shadows and protrusions created by fallen rocks and random erosion. Unlike a carved statue where features are incised or raised with intention, the face of the Balochistan Sphinx changes dramatically with the sun's angle, sometimes appearing present and at other times vanishing completely. These shifting illusions are a powerful reminder that our brains are wired to find faces, even in the random contours of a cliffside. The sensationalized narrative offers a satisfyingly simple answer, but the rock itself tells a more complex and equally fascinating story of elemental forces. If these obvious signs are not so obvious after all, what would it truly take to prove a human origin beyond any reasonable doubt? This radical theory pushes the origins of the Sphinx into the realm of the almost mythical, suggesting it is a surviving fragment of a global civilization that flourished before a great cataclysm. Proponents of this view argue that mainstream archaeology is like a person who has lost their memory. trying to piece together their identity from a handful of random objects while ignoring the colossal, forgotten library that stands just behind them. In this narrative, the Sphinx of Balochistan is not a product of any known culture from recorded history, but a relic from a pre-glacial epoch, a time often placed at the end of the last ice age over 12,000 years ago. This was an era when, according to this theory, a sophisticated society possessed a profound understanding of astronomy, engineering, and geometry. They were not primitive hunter-gatherers, but master builders whose technological and spiritual knowledge was so advanced it rivals and perhaps even surpasses our own in certain ways. The argument follows a compelling, if speculative, logic. How else do you explain the sheer scale and precision of such a monument in a time frame that conventional history labels as undeveloped? The builders would have needed not just manpower, but a sophisticated system of mathematics to plan the proportions, a deep knowledge of geology to select and shape the site, and an understanding of celestial cycles to potentially align it with the stars. This was not a project born of gradual cultural evolution, but the work of a people who had already perfected their art. The cataclysm that ended the Ice Age, with its rapidly rising sea levels and climatic chaos, did not just flood coastlines. It wiped the slate of history almost completely clean, obliterating this mother culture and scattering its survivors across the globe. These refugees, according to the theory, then became the seeds for the later civilizations we do know, like the Egyptians, the Sumerians, and the Indus Valley people, who carried fractured memories and partial knowledge of their glorious predecessors. The Sphinx of Balochistan, then, is not an anomaly. It is a cornerstone of this forgotten world, a piece of evidence that has stubbornly refused to erode away entirely. Its water-worn features are not a problem to be explained away, but the very proof of its immense antiquity, a direct witness to the great floods that reshaped the planet. This idea forces us to confront a humbling possibility. What if human history is not a straight line of progress from simple to complex, but a cycle of rise and catastrophic fall, where advanced knowledge is gained, lost, and then slowly, painstakingly rediscovered over millennia? If this is true, then the silent stone beast is not just a statue. It is a warning and a message from a lost age waiting for us to learn how to read it. Unlocking the secrets of the Sphinx of Balochistan would demand a scientific expedition of unprecedented scale. A formal investigation would deploy a full arsenal of modern technology, starting with ground-penetrating radar to map any hidden chambers or voids within the colossal structure. Core drills would extract samples from its weathered skin, searching for microscopic evidence of ancient tools or pigments. Every inch of the surrounding terrain would be meticulously scanned with magnetometers and electrical resistivity tomography, creating a three-dimensional blueprint of the potential temple complex buried beneath the sand. Drones equipped with high-resolution LiDAR would map the entire area, stripping away the surface to reveal the subtle geometry of the foundations and the true alignment of the scattered pillar-like stones. This data would be the first concrete evidence, moving the debate beyond photographs and into the realm of measurable fact. Such an undertaking requires immense funding, potentially millions of dollars, to cover specialized equipment, a large team of archaeologists, geologists, and local laborers, and the logistical nightmare of sustaining them in a remote desert for months. Crucially, none of this can happen without the official permission of the Pakistani government, specifically its Department of Archaeology, which currently views the site as a geological formation, not a historical one. Gaining that permit would require presenting a compelling, evidence-based proposal that can overcome deep-seated academic skepticism. The most formidable obstacle is the location itself. Balochistan is a vast, rugged, and sparsely populated province. The site is far from any major city, with no reliable roads, power, or water sources. Transporting heavy equipment and a research team would be a monumental feat of logistics. Beyond the physical remoteness lies the issue of regional political instability. with security concerns often deterring foreign researchers and making long-term fieldwork a risky proposition. To even begin, scientists would need to bridge a profound credibility gap, convincing a skeptical establishment to invest in what it sees as a wild goose chase. They would have to build a case so strong, using preliminary data so convincing, that it justifies braving the deserts and the doubts to finally ask the stone beast its oldest question and be prepared for the earth to answer. While the stone itself remains silent, its digital echo has become a roaring chorus across the internet. The story of the Balochistan Sphinx has been seized and shaped by the modern media landscape, creating a public perception that often has little to do with the rock in the desert. On one end of the spectrum, you have serious independent researchers and documentary channels. These creators present the site with a measured tone, carefully laying out the geological arguments alongside the potential architectural anomalies. They use satellite imagery, topographic maps, and on-the-ground footage to build their case, inviting the viewer to weigh the evidence for themselves. Their narrative is one of open questioning, framing the Sphinx as an intriguing archaeological puzzle that deserves a closer look from mainstream science. This approach fosters a community of amateur sleuths and history enthusiasts who dissect every new photo and video, sharing their findings in lengthy comment threads and dedicated forums. Yet for every channel dedicated to sober analysis, there are countless others that thrive on sensationalism. Clickbait titles scream about a cover-up by archaeologists or a discovery that rewrites all of history. These videos often feature dramatic music, flashing images, and bold, unsubstantiated claims. They might present a shadow on a rock as a hidden doorway or a trick of the light as a carved hieroglyph, framing any skepticism as a deliberate attempt to suppress the truth. This type of content, produced by what many call sensationalist farms, prioritizes mystery over methodology, crafting a narrative of forbidden knowledge that is irresistibly shareable. The same story fractures further across blogs and social media platforms. On sites like Reddit, lengthy posts meticulously analyze erosion patterns, while on Instagram and TikTok, the Sphinx is reduced to a 60-second mystery with trending audio. The algorithm favors the most dramatic and engaging version of the truth, meaning the wildest theories often gain the most traction, reaching audiences who will never see the more nuanced debates. This media ecosystem has created two distinct public perceptions. One views the Sphinx as a serious, if unproven, archaeological candidate, a mystery worthy of investigation. The other sees it as definitive proof of a lost advanced civilization, its man-made origin treated as an established fact that a corrupt academic establishment refuses to acknowledge. The real mystery has become entangled in a digital hall of mirrors, where the line between investigation and entertainment has been permanently blurred, and the silent stone in Balochistan is now a character in a story written by 1,000 different authors. The journey to this remote stretch of desert is a pilgrimage through silence and rock. After hours on rough, unpaved tracks that fade into the vastness, you leave your vehicle with the understanding that the final approach is on foot. The air is hot and heavy, carrying the scent of dry earth and dust. As you walk, the landscape seems to swallow all sound, leaving only the crunch of your own footsteps and the whisper of the wind. Then you crest a low ridge and it appears. No photograph can prepare you for the sheer physical presence of the formation. It does not simply sit in the landscape, it dominates it, a leviathan of stone that seems to absorb the sunlight, casting a long, cool shadow that feels ancient. The scale is humbling, forcing a visceral recognition of your own smallness against this timeless sentinel. Up close, the texture of the rock is a storybook of erosion. It is not rough and jagged, but surprisingly smooth to the eye, worn down by countless centuries of elemental forces. You can see the distinct layers of sedimentary rock, like the pages of a giant book, some layers protruding as hard ridges while others have been scooped into deep, rounded hollows. Running your hand over the surface, you feel the grit of countless sand grains embedded in the stone, a testament to the desert winds that have polished it for millennia. The atmosphere is one of profound solitude. Standing in the shadow of the giant, you are struck by the absolute quiet, a stillness that feels heavy with unspoken history. This is not the curated silence of a museum, but the deep, primal quiet of the earth itself. You find yourself looking for any sign, any mark that would confirm the touch of a tool, the intention of a sculptor. But the rock offers only ambiguous clues, its surface a canvas where nature and potential artistry are fused into one inseparable mystery. The scattered, pillar-like stones around the base add to the eerie feeling. They do not look like random boulders, but like the fallen columns of a temple roof, lying in a jumble that suggests a sudden, catastrophic collapse. To stand there is to feel the weight of the question physically. You are not just thinking about the mystery, you are standing inside of it, surrounded by the crumbling bones of a potential city that the world forgot. The silence here is not empty, it is listening. The ultimate fate of this stone guardian rests on a knife's edge between legend and science. Will it forever remain a spectacular what-if story, a monument championed by independent voices but ignored by official institutions? Or will a future generation finally arrive with the technology and the will to solve its riddle once and for all? The answer likely hinges on the evolution of our tools. Ground-penetrating radar could be the key that unlocks the mystery without ever touching a stone. By sending pulses of energy into the ground, this technology can create a detailed sonogram of the earth beneath the formation, revealing the hidden geometry of chambers, tunnels, or foundations that are invisible from the surface. Imagine a clear, three-dimensional map showing a perfectly square room nestled within the beast's chest, or a network of passages leading deep underground. Such a discovery would be impossible to dismiss, forcing a complete re-evaluation of the site. Beyond radar, artificial intelligence offers another path forward. Advanced AI algorithms could be trained to analyze thousands of satellite and drone images, comparing the formation's geometry and erosion patterns against a vast database of known natural landforms and man-made structures. The AI would not be swayed by pareidolia or preconceived notions. It could deliver a cold, statistical probability, calculating whether the shape and its surrounding features fall within the realm of natural chance or clearly outside of it. These technologies are no longer science fiction. They are readily available and could be deployed by a properly funded and permitted expedition. The greatest obstacle is not the capability, but the conviction. For these tools to be used, someone with authority must first believe the question is worth asking. The more plausible future, at least in the near term, is one of sustained ambiguity. The official archaeological stance, bound by a rigorous burden of proof, is unlikely to shift without that undeniable subsurface evidence. The Sphinx of Balochistan may continue to be a fascinating footnote, a destination for adventurous tourists and dedicated researchers, but not a certified part of our historical record. It will live on in documentaries and online forums, its story growing richer with each new interpretation, but its truth remaining just out of reach. Yet there is another, more hopeful path. What if the growing public fascination creates its own kind of pressure? As more people learn its story, the call for a definitive investigation grows louder. This grassroots interest could eventually attract a private foundation or a university with a pioneering spirit, one willing to risk its reputation on a long shot. A single, conclusive discovery, like a tool fragment cemented into the rock or an inscription weathered beyond recognition but detectable by laser scan, could change everything overnight. The site would be instantly transformed from a geological curiosity into a protected World Heritage Site, drawing teams of international archaeologists and rewriting textbooks. This stone beast holds a mirror to our own desire for discovery. Its future is not written in its rock, but in our own willingness to look past what we think we know and venture into the unknown. The mystery persists not because the answers are impossible to find, but because we have not yet dared to search for them in the right way. So we are left standing before this giant, its story caught between the forces of nature and the genius of humankind. The geological perspective presents a powerful case, showing us how wind and water can sculpt the land into breathtaking illusions, with the Balochistan Formation as a masterpiece of natural artistry. Its smoothed contours and layered grooves align perfectly with the known behavior of sedimentary rock worn down over eons. Yet the argument for a human hand is equally compelling, pointing to the uncanny symmetry, the terraced platforms, and the scattered stones that resemble a fallen temple complex. These features whisper of architects, not just elements. The truth is, we may never have a definitive answer that satisfies everyone, and perhaps that is the real power of this mystery. It speaks to something deep within us, a relentless drive to look at a lonely stone sentinel in a distant desert and see more than just a rock. We see a potential message, a connection to a past we have forgotten, a story waiting to be read. This longing to uncover our origins, to solve the ancient puzzles left behind, is what pushes exploration forward. It is why we gaze at the stars and dig into the earth. The Sphinx of Balochistan, whether a trick of the wind or a monument from a lost age, challenges us to keep questioning. The investigation does not end here. It continues with you. Look at the images, read the arguments from geologists and researchers, and decide for yourself what story this stone beast tells. Then share your perspective. Your voice becomes part of the ongoing search, a new chapter in the enduring human quest to understand where we came from. What do you believe is watching over that silent desert?